Hi everyone. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the poems in the poetry packet, some in greater detail than others. But I want to point out a few things that we can see happening in some of the poems, and we want to talk about how you can maybe integrate some of those same elements into your own poem. So be thinking about the ways in which these poets are creating a sense of place, how it is that they help us feel like we're actually there. And so let's talk about some of those elements in the poems. And so the first one to look at is by Robert Hayden. I can't see the title. There it is. It's called Those Winter Sundays. Um, and so already from the title, we're getting a sense of a setting, not necessarily a place, but a time. Winter and what winter means to us, right? All the things that come to mind when we think about winter, cold, potentially snowy, Sundays and what it means to be on a Sunday. And often for many people, not always, but for many people, Sundays are days that people don't have to go to work. They might rest. Others of us do have to go to work on Sundays, but still Sundays can bring to mind some of those ideas there. So already from the opening, we're getting a sense of setting, a sense of place and time, which is what we're looking to develop in this poem. Excuse me. So, well, I'm going to go ahead and read this poem, and then we can look at some of the elements that we see here and talk about what he's doing to make us feel like we're in that particular place. So he says, "Those winter Sundays. Sundays, too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor and the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know, what did I know of love's austere and lonely offices?" So let's look at some of the things that he has going on in here. I mean, we can get a sense of, the poet is in bed. His father is working on the fire. Excuse me, and we're getting a sense that maybe he doesn't appreciate what his father does. But let's look at how we build this sense of where we are. So Sundays too, again, just that sense of saying Sunday and what we expect of that. Sundays too, my father got up early. So even on Sundays, he got up early, and so we have a sense that Sunday might is supposed to be the day of rest, but it's not necessarily a day of rest for his father. And so again, how we might feel on a Sunday, people feeling like they don't have to get up, but the Father feels that way. And so, again, the sense of what it feels like to be in a place where, somebody might not want to have to get up. If, usually it's the child might be having to go to school or something, but Sunday, you may not have to get up as early. Even though they are going to go to church, as we can see later on. But we get a sense about what that feels like, right? We have some ideas that are transmitted just by that word Sunday, and so just it's a little thing, but kind of keep that in mind. But then we say that the father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue black cold. I think that's a really important element that we have here. He's going to describe the cold as being blue black, and one of the things to keep in mind here is that the cold doesn't have a color, right? Uh, um, Cold is something that you feel. But I think what's interesting here is that he decides to describe he describes the cold, the feeling on the skin with this color, and we can kind of imagine what's going on here. What is really blue black is the sky early in the morning before the sun comes up. You get that sense of that color of being blue black, and so we can on some levels see the time of day it is before sunrise, when everything seems just at dawn, when things might seem to be blue black. And then we can also feel that cold at the same time. And so, one of the things that happens, we have this very different way of trying to describe something that we've all experienced. And if we describe it in a way that we haven't necessarily seen before, That's the kind of thing that allows us to go, oh, now I'm really there. If we describe it in a way that we always describe it, then we're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I understand what you're talking about. But if we describe it in a way we haven't seen it before, it makes us think about it a bit more deeply, and we kind of go into it. Blue, black, cold. What is that? First of all, just the idea of putting those two words together, blue, black, right, and seeing that time of dawn, and then describing the cold as being that. And I'm like, all right, now I'm really in that winter morning, early. We haven't got a lot of light in the winter, and that blue black cold is doing a lot of work for that. And so just think about these kind of surprising ways that we can potentially describe our setting, especially in a way that might cut across the senses, right? This idea of being able to see the cold. And so that's going to be something fresh and new that we have here. He's going to go on later on and talk about then with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather. And that's not necessarily much about place by itself per se, but if you look at this idea of his cracked hands and they ached from labor, we get a sense of the social class of this of the people involved. The idea that the father is going to be a laborer, he works with his hands, and one of the things that happens too with those hands when they're cracked, now we can feel that. We know what it feels like if your hands are cracked, and especially in the cold, that probably hurts. That aches. And he's they ache from this labor in the weekday weather, right? And so we can feel that, and that gives a sense maybe of the kind of house that we're going to be in, right? If we imagine this, we know the kind of place where we might be, because this is the kind of place where people have to get up and work with their hands every day. And so that gives us a sense of where we are as well. So even through something so small and physical as that, he's, something on the person, we can begin to get a sense of where we actually are in space. And then it says on with cracked hands from labor in the weekday weather made banked fires blaze. I have a comment over here. This is annotated, and in the folder you've got an annotated version in a Word document, and then you've got a non-annotated version in the PDF. And so hopefully the Word document will open for you, but if it doesn't, you still have the poem without the annotations over here in the PDF version. But he says that he made banked fires blaze, and I say here that a banked fire is one in which the coals are burning, but there are no flames. Right, the fire is banked at night to conserve wood. Then in the morning, made to blaze so that flames can give off heat. So just to tell you what's going on with that, we bank a fire, bring it down to just coals, and then we bring it up to blaze. And so that's what he's doing. He's getting the house warm in the morning. And then we come down here. He says, I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. Again, that's a surprising line that we have here, because we have this cold before we talk about the blue black cold, but here we have the cold splintering and breaking. Cold cannot splinter and break. Cold is the temperature. You cannot splinter or break the cold. What can splinter or break is the wood in the fire, right? And you can imagine here, I think that's one of the fun things about this. You can imagine hearing the fire, right? You can hear the crackling of the fire, the way in which the wood seems to splinter and break. And he's going to translate that to the cold. He's going to make us feel like the cold is the thing that's breaking apart. It also, if the cold can break apart, it makes the cold feel as if it's very solid, which makes it seem like, the entire room is almost filled with ice or something like that. And so we've really gotten a sense of being in this place through these kind of tricks that we're using. Again, by describing things in these unexpected ways, by using senses that we aren't necessarily used to using with something, right? By talking about what we can see the cold looking like, or what we can hear the cold looking like. So we're using all those senses, but sometimes cutting across those things. And so just think about ways in which you can potentially be surprising your reader with these kinds of descriptions. Because once we have that, then it makes some sense to say, when the rooms were warm, he'd call slowly and I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house. And I like that. The chronic angers, chronic is something that continues on over a long period of time. And if we talk about the chronic angers of that house, you can feel that there's a lot of tension in the house. And again, that fits along with the cold, right? We can talk about cold, emotionally cold, and things like that. And so I think that's useful for helping us feel like we're there as well. And then he says, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well, right? So he doesn't, speaking indifferently, he doesn't speak warmly to his father. He used that word warm and cold. He's not like he's thanking his father, as we said up above. And then we have down here, what did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? And I say down here, austere means severe or strict. And it's something that's not comforting, right? And then we say, what do we mean by offices? Offices here means a position of great responsibility. That's why we talk about things like the office of the president. And so I think what he's saying here is this position of great responsibility, is being a father, being a parent. Um, and it's austere. It's something that's strict. It doesn't have much comfort to it. And we might be saying on some level that being a parent is going to be difficult. And people aren't going to thank you. You aren't necessarily going to, people aren't going to wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, Father, we thank you so much for warming the house and providing all this shelter for us and food." Nobody's necessarily going to say that, but he gets up and does it anyway. Um, and I think that on some level, understanding where we are is what's going to really help us understand what's going on here. That the father gets up in the cold, right? He's not worried about his own comfort. And so we had to see all of that. We had to feel that cold. We had to see the blue black of the cold. We had to hear the fire breaking to be able to understand what it means for the father to get up and how that's a kind of a sacrifice for him. And so we can see how the place here helps us understand something about the idea. So for your first preliminary poetry assignment, you are going to be just describing the place. I don't need you to necessarily worry about the big idea yet, but just start describing a place, right? And really think about describing it in a way that's new and fresh, a way that we haven't seen before. And in some ways, if we haven't seen it before, that will help the reader understand it even better, right? As we can see that Robert Hayden's been doing here. So we'll keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video now because, again, I have only 15 minutes at a time. And then we'll have a part 2 of this video in which I'm going to go through some of the other poems in the poetry packet. I won't spend as much time on those. I'm going to just rush through those maybe a little bit more. But I'm going to want you, when you get to your poetry discussion board, to talk about some of the details there. And again, in that it says in the instructions there that you aren't supposed to mention anything that I've already mentioned. So you can't really talk anything about those winter Sundays because I've talked about that in detail. Some of the other poems, though, I'm going to run through rather quickly, and then you'll have the opportunity to find your own elements in there that you found intriguing, and then be able to discuss those in the discussion board.